I-105.5 and 1450 AM, we're catching up with Hillary Lima, candidate for Town Council in District 4 in Coventry, and the special election that's coming up in just a few weeks. Good to see you. Welcome aboard.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I'm really happy to be in studio today and do so safely and support the local station. Thank you.
First of all, who on earth is Hillary Lima?
What a great question. So Hillary Lima, maiden name Costa, just recently got married. Was born and raised in West Warwick, believe it or not. So right over the line, grew up in the Crompton neighborhood, went to West Warwick Public Schools my whole life. Later lived off of Wakefield Street, which is again nearby, and graduated West Warwick High School in 2010. After graduating high school, I went on to Rhode Island College, so staying in state, and graduated with dual bachelor's degrees in communication and political science. While I was at RIC, I was involved in all sorts of extracurricular activities. I rose to the ranks of president of student government at Rhode Island College, and also was very involved in civic extracurricular activities. So I was a page in the Senate when I was in college. I also served as a legislative intern in the Senate when I was in college as well. And also was involved greatly with the American Democracy Project. So that involved having panels on campus about civic engagement, and also just bringing general awareness about civics to fellow students in the campus community. So beyond that, while I was in college, I was working at Kent Hospital. I was a dietary aide delivering dinner trays, and I always used to get asked, "Oh, are you going to school to become a nurse?" No, I give a lot of credit to nurses. It's not something that I had in me to do, but I ended up entering the healthcare field through marketing and public relations. So I started my first big girl job, I like to say, was with Women and Infants Hospital in Providence, doing marketing and public relations, and I learned a ton. And I learned that I really value healthcare, and it's something I'm super passionate about, and it was something I always wanted to stick with in my career. So from Women and Infants, I went on to for a temporary contract position at CVS Health, the corporate center in Woonsocket. I worked on that team briefly, and then went to South County Hospital, so the community hospital based in Narragansett, Wakefield area. From there, I went to work at a public relations firm based in Providence called SVM. This year's their 50th anniversary. They've been around a long time. Kind of a word-of-mouth type of agency. You don't hear about them as much as, say, the other agencies like NAIL or RDW. But so really working with emerging startups and technology companies in healthcare and software. And one of the things I'm really proud about is I work with a lot of our Rhode Island-based clients. So that's currently what I'm doing right now. So before coming to Coventry, my husband and I lived in Cranston for a few years, and we chose to come to Coventry because it's close to where my parents live and a lot of my immediate family lives. And we're looking ahead to when we start a family, having them close around to us. So that's really the kind of the rundown on Hillary Lima.
The cynic in me would say something like, "Boy, you worked at the State House, you can pick up a lot of bad habits there." But obviously, it provided you with some foundation as you make this run for council. What did you learn in the State House that can help translate onto something good, if elected here?
It honestly, John, was just kind of an eye-opening experience to see all of the nuance that goes on in government. So part of my job as a page was, and it was real simple. I'd show up at, I believe it was 3:30, and we were all assigned certain portions of the Senate chamber to essentially monitor. So as a page, you stand at the chamber doors, and on the side of the rostrum where the Senate president would stand, at the time it was Teresa Paiva-Weed, there's lights that show half of the Senate rotunda. And when a light comes on, you have to go to that senator's desk and you say, Senator so-and-so, can I get you anything? And part of the job was you were expected to memorize every single senator's name and know the face. They sent you home with a piece of paper that had all their headshots on it and where they sat. And I remember I took that so seriously. So we'd go to them and, they'd ask for anything, something as small as a glass of cranberry juice. Can you go to my desk and get this piece of paper related to this bill? And then after a while, what they do is you get kind of promoted and you get to go to the committee meetings. And the committee meetings are where you learn a ton. And so committee meetings where, obviously House Finance was considered the coup de grace, like only the best of the best and that have been doing it for a long time would go to something like that. But in committee meetings, you get to see where things are really fleshed out. You hear arguments from both sides. Of course, there are people that can come and publicly testify at these meetings. And you realize that, while things always, something might sound bad or something might sound great when you first hear about it, you realize that there's so many other things you need to consider and think about fully when you're talking about legislation or ideas or concepts or ordinances that affect everyday people, right? And I think that's kind of lost in our conversations that we have with each other and with our politicians and media today. And that's thinking things through completely and thinking about the impact that everything has in a widespread way. So the other piece of it too was just learning how everyone networks with each other and how everything's interconnected and all that it takes to pull session together and maybe in a Schoolhouse Rock kind of way, how it goes from being a proposed resolution or a bill all the way through to the governor's desk for signature, right? So it was an eye-opening, especially when I became a legislative intern in the Senate. I remember specifically, I'll never forget it, I worked on a policy briefing packet, which is a fancy way of saying background information, for there is a small brewery in North Kingstown, Exeter area called Tilted Barn Brewery. I'm sure some of the listeners have heard of it. They wanted to be able to sell larger amounts of beer for people to take home. And there's laws in Rhode Island that prohibit that. So we were trying to show in this policy briefing packet that where Rhode Island stands in comparison to the greater Northeast and those rules, and also show what the advocate side was saying about it. So sitting in on this meeting, I got to see the liquor lobby come in, like people from up as high as Bud Light coming in saying they felt that this would encroach on their liquor store sales, and then seeing other small brewers come in to support this and talk about how it has to be integrated into the fabric of the economy with breweries, all the way down to seeing how senators themselves react, how they take in this information, and then where it goes from there. So really, really learned a ton, and so grateful for that experience to be up close and personal like that.
Let's talk Coventry. If you go on the website, your website, you'll see your platform and some of the major issues we're going to talk about now. Let's kind of take it one by one. Offering to help small business. Go.
So I think a real first easy step with helping small businesses, or just showing that we support them and we want to include them in our decision making in the town, is starting to integrate public leaders in Coventry into the local Chamber of Commerce. Getting into those meetings, and it doesn't have to be just a Coventry-focused Chamber of Commerce, because we're all interconnected, right? When our neighboring businesses, say in West Warwick, succeed, we see that trickle over into Coventry and succeed there. So I think that's a really important step. Part of my campaign is not just with the residents. I'm also going right up and down Tioga Avenue here and looking to speak with managers. And I've already started that conversation, speaking with managers and owners within the District 4 Tioga Ave Business District. And that's super, super important to me, because I've seen the power that a connected small business community can have on a community. It's a trickle-down effect. You see it in other cities and towns around the state, where owners of restaurants are organizing toy drives, and it's bringing people together to support those in need. Or you're seeing businesses come together to raise money for local sports teams or sponsoring sports teams. You're seeing maybe some of these restaurants having fundraisers by coming together to support specific family in need. Or maybe it's in a situation like this with the pandemic, it's businesses coming together to recognize and uplift the Coventry seniors at the high school. There's power in just building that community support and connecting between all of the other businesses that already exist and public leaders like us. Because while there's business to be conducted within town hall, or should I say in our own homes virtually, part of that is a community element. And I think that's an above and beyond facet of being a public official that is just as, if not important.
Item number 2, collaboration with the school department. You grew up in West Warwick. You've seen sometimes the struggle, especially before you graduated in 2010, the struggle between town management, municipal officials, and members of the school committee. You see it a little bit in Coventry now. How do you help?
So I think this is a problem, John, that's happening all over the state. I don't think you can point to any single city or town that's not having issues with communication up and down or side to side between the school committee and the town councils. I think there's work that's already happening. If anyone's tuned into the town council or school committee meetings recently, they're starting to engage with each other more. And I think that's a result of the recent town financial referenda. And it's also just the basic temperature that we're getting from the town is that these two bodies are not communicating with each other as best as they could. And honestly, if you listen to the two bodies, they want to work together. They want it to make it work. So I have to give those two bodies credit currently. And they know that the students and the staff and the system at all is incredibly important. So I think it's a matter of continuing that effort to engage with one another, which we already know is in the works. And the other piece, too, that's refreshing to see, and this doesn't happen in a lot of cities and towns, is on the last town council agenda, you'll note that they discussed items to include on an agenda in a joint meeting between the school committee, the town council, and the legislative representation, which is huge. That's not happening in some of the biggest cities and towns in this state. So I have to give them credit. They're making the right strides. And if given the opportunity to serve for District 4, I would only continue to support those efforts. And that's the kind of steps that you can take to really turn a town like Coventry around and realize its potential and work together.
You mentioned communication with taxpayers, and that's a big one for me because you look at Coventry, 27,000 eligible voters, 900 turn up for referenda to decide the fate of the budget, which affects themselves, not only their pocketbook, but also their municipal services. What on earth can be brought to the table in order to get that number up and to make it somewhat more representative?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because as someone who might have voted, you look at that total and you think, what's with the apathy? And as someone who didn't vote, you say, well, what do you expect me to do? I feel like my voice isn't heard, right? We're on our third town financial referenda. So sometimes what that forces you to do, and I'm not a proponent for either or, maybe it's time to sit down and discuss, is a town financial meeting, is a town referenda process what this Coventry right now wants, needs, and finds most helpful to get their voice across or to get a budget across. So, that's something maybe that needs to be considered or discussed, right? I know that town financial meetings have certainly been well attended. I know the benefits of a town financial meeting system and that of just the council and school committee doing a budget with, say, their respective mayor or town manager. I've lived and been a part of both systems. There's been pros and cons to both. And it's just a matter of taking the response that you're getting from voters, maybe in an indirect way, and deciding the best path forward and really thinking, how better do we engage with them? Beyond something like a town financial meeting, I found I went door to door this past weekend with a group of about 12 doing a literature drop, and just the response was, we got a great response back via email and via phone that day, and it just was, we haven't been contacted by somebody, or we're really happy that someone's going door to door. So it's just a matter of doing the little things right and making the effort to reach out to them. So if I got the opportunity to serve the constituents of District 4, I'd look for ways to communicate with them in a regular newsletter. I know other city and town officials and other state and other municipalities do that. And the other thing, too, that I've really thought about and I've seen take off in other cities and towns is a new resident packet, getting a welcome packet when you move into town. That sets the tone right there that we care about you and your voice, and we want you to understand all your resources and how this town works, and how you can exercise your voice and your civic duty here in town.
My next question is actually just one word: sewers.
So, John, sewers are the main thing that really perked me up to start really paying attention late summer and fall. As someone who lives in the anticipated phase 1 of the mandated program, it's scary to think about and really paying attention to it. And the reason why is, and I know I'm not alone in this, my husband and I, when we planned to purchase a home in Coventry, and we're first-time home buyers, we set a specific budget. We said this is what we can afford for a mortgage and home insurance, for other bills like car insurance. This is what we can afford for water bill, utilities, etc. And of course, we're oil, so what we can afford for oil each winter. And we certainly weren't anticipating having to pay for additional fees or a loan with a sewer program. Not to mention, when it comes to our section of Coventry, which, as you know, with the amount of ledge in the area, which drives up the price of the estimates. I'd say, I absolutely see the benefit of sewers, and I myself hope to transfer my home over to sewers from septic at some point. But to put that kind of cost on the backs of taxpayers in the middle of a global pandemic, in the middle of a pandemic-induced economic recession when so many are out of work and having trouble finding jobs, it doesn't feel like a taxpayer-centric process. So we want to make sure we give everybody all the information they need to make that decision themselves, and we want to make sure that they understand the process of from start to finish. What is the estimate paperwork going to look like? When will you receive it? What exactly am I paying for? And how long would be the life of the loan? Or I live on a corner lot. Are you going to put an estimate on me for a side street or the street that runs in the front of my house? There's all sorts of questions that, it's a very fluid situation. And those who are especially part of the phase 1 portion of the program really deserve to have a lot of transparency, and maybe even go so far as getting frequent snail mail from town hall on where it stands. I'd also love to see, maybe the town or the town website posting notice or the minutes of these sewer subcommittee meetings. Right now, they're only listed on the open meetings website for the state, and I think we could do more, considering how much residents care, to put it on the town website and even do a little bit more social media on the town's Facebook page as well.
I think the next two questions are kind of interrelated. Trying to provide some type of information to residents with regard to the next 5 to 10 years and the development of a plan to attack their budget needs of the town, a forecast over the next 5 to 10 years. Along with that is economic development, because you and I both know that there's one of two ways to skin a cat. You either raise taxes or cut expenses. So let's kind of combine that and give me a platform point. Yeah,
You've heard the phrase, you can't cut your way to the top, right? But you also can't continue to raise taxes and raise expenses and costs and not expect taxpayers to ask where their investment is going and how it's being used. And, I like to think of funds, of taxpayer funds, or how the government spends its money, much like how my own family would. We have a budget. We have a set means of how much we can spend per week, or how much we can spend for a project, or we're saying, we'll get to updating this room in the house when we get to X amount saved, and it feels like we should expect our government to do the same. And there's also the notion of maintenance, John. So the idea that we don't let something get to such disrepair infrastructure-wise that we then have to go to extreme measures, and we see higher taxes reflected that are to a point of such impact in our bills. So, for example, we just heard in the recent town council meeting that our plows in town and other DPW vehicles are in such disrepair that we haven't been able to field a complete fleet of plows for any storm yet this year. That's something where we should build into capital improvement and ensure that that's funded, or have a 5 to 10 year economic plan or a capital improvement plan to ensure that 1 or 2 trucks every so many years, and it should be every few based on the Director McGee's testimony the other night, to replace those trucks. Given how important doing the little stuff right is, right? We don't think about it, but we count on plows to ensure that our streets are safe and cleared. So the fact that we have vehicles that are 15 to 20 years old, I mean, some of us aren't even driving cars that are that old, or most of us aren't driving cars that are that old. So it's thinking about planning ahead in a town strategic plan or a capital improvement plan to incrementally make these changes. And that's something that makes sense in the minds of a taxpayer. That's something you can get buy-in from on a taxpayer to understand we're doing things on an incremental basis instead of waiting until things get so bad that we then have to really dip into the honey pot to make the change or bring things up to the level that they need to be.
You've watched the council meetings and you've seen the development of Kimberly Shockley, Jen Ludwig, and Jamie LeBlanc, who were elected in November and basically had to jump in with both feet. How long is it going to take you to get on a learning curve?
I don't see serving as a public official as a destination. I consider it always a journey. There's always going to be something that I need to learn, and I expect that, and I embrace it. I embrace the fact that I'm always going to have to learn about certain issues in town, or there's going to be things that I'm not as well versed in as I should be. And I embrace that challenge, and I look forward to that challenge. To say that I'll ever be completely up to snuff on any topic, I think, is not something that should be expected. You always want to be learning and growing and understanding and making sure that you're seeing things from all angles. I've certainly done my best in the past couple of months. Even before Councilman Cody resigned, I was already attending council meetings, already looking to attend school committee meetings. In fact, I was attending a school committee meeting a couple of weeks ago where committee member Murray was talking about the school building committee. Asked him a question there, talked about the public relations of the project, and given the fact that the town rejected three budgets already, how are we going to get the town to buy into this bond for schools? So already having all these meetings on my radar, attending, if not most, if not all, that's making the effort to really be involved and understand what's going on. And making sure to have a dialogue with voters too. We can't just be shouting from a mountaintop. We have to listen, and it has to be a two-way street.
If Hillary Lima gets elected, she would be the 4th female on a 5-person council, something new to Coventry, something new to the area. Does that have the cachet that it would have 10 years ago? How much does it mean to have 4 female councilors if you're elected?
It means that someone who was like me, who went to school committee meetings or town financial meetings in middle school and high school, gets to see someone that she can look up to. And she can look and say, I can do that. I can't wait until I'm old enough and I can participate and I can vote and I can do that. That's what that means to me. I remember even just 10, 15 years ago now, I was sitting in these meetings and it was, for the most part, all men. And the fact that it could potentially be, more than 75% women on this council is just crazy to think about. And I'm not sure many, even 10, 15 years ago, would have believed that would have even happened. But most important for me, it's that someone who's in school now, a young woman who's maybe looked around during the last year with all the civics we've had thrown at us from all the vitriol and hate in the politics, and takes something out of it, the process. And if I win and I'm serving along with Member Shockley, Member Dixon, Member Ludwig, sees that wow, like I can do this. And not to mention it's women of all ages, right? Going right on down from Dixon through to me if given the opportunity. So it's not just about gender, it's about age, right? It's people at all different places in their life, truly a representative body of Coventry.
Hillary Lima, thanks for the insight. We'll catch you down the road. Good luck.
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're listening to I-105.5 and 1450 AM.